It was going to be our year, 2008. John and I had been happily married for 3 years. We were living in our first house, our careers were going well, and we were so excited for the arrival of our son. The nursery freshly painted and stocked with diapers and burping cloths. We were anticipating all of the norms that new parents encounter, and we were ready for it. And then, from the moment he was born, our lives were whirlwinded into chaos. Why won't he eat? Should we switch his formula? He's projectile vomiting. It literally just hit the wall. Is it normal to have purple bags under his eyes? I can't get him to stop crying. That last one was the worst. Night after night, day after day, the wailing would cut through me. But I knew he was in pain, so I kept that at the forefront. I needed to figure this out. Our doctors kept switching the formulas. The word allergy didn't quite come up, but we heard intolerance a lot. One day, when he was about 5 weeks old, it was so bad that I took him to the ER. The doctor, an old-timer, looked at him, looked at me, and said, "Sweetie, this is colic. Do you know what colic is? Go home and have a glass of wine." I tightened my jaw, rolled my shoulders, and smiled. Thanks for nothing. Well, 11 days later, he was in that same emergency room getting prepped for emergency surgery. And yes, I did tell them to keep the old-timer away from me and my kid. Our son had pyloric stenosis. Essentially, food wasn't making its way through his system, and the only place it could go was up. Finally, we had an answer. He would have surgery and be fixed. Not quite. The pain didn't stop, the crying didn't stop, the vomit didn't stop, although it didn't hit the wall anymore. 2 more formula changes, and now the eczema. We just puttered through life, hoping that it would just get better on its own. It was now Easter, and he was looking in his basket. He picked up an Easter egg and started playing with it. Truthfully, I don't know if it hit his mouth, but I do know that he started throwing up and turning all shades of colors. My husband and I were frantic in the kitchen. We called the doctor, and they told us to give him Benadryl and get him to the ER immediately. Hindsight, we should have just called 911. And in 2018, we know that antihistamine isn't always the right first answer. We lived close, so we booked it over there right away. They ran the gamut of testing, and sure enough, he was positive for some allergies. Now, he was only 5 months old, and typically, a baby is running off of mom's immune system for the first 6 months of life. This is layman's terms. So the fact that he was testing positive at all was nerve-wracking. We were referred to an allergist, and so we went. The appointment was awful. About 25 pricks on his little back, and an hour later we heard the words we were fearing. "We have answers, but not the ones you want. Your son is highly allergic to peanuts. He is also allergic to milk, wheat, soy, tree nuts, and eggs. Eventually, he would also be diagnosed with fish, shellfish, coconut, sesame, and pork. Yes, pork. Top 8 plus 3 more. I cried and panicked and floundered. How would we do this? It wasn't easy. We messed up. We lost friends and family members. We gained new ones. We annoyed people. We annoyed ourselves. We educated ourselves. We became stronger. We learned to deal. We triumphed. But it took years. Eventually, our son would outgrow many of his allergies. By 3, he was able to do milk, wheat, soy, fish, and shellfish. By 4, he could do coconut, sesame, and pork. But peanuts, eggs, and tree nuts were here to stay, and they were hard. Navigating school was no picnic. Dealing with parents and an administration who didn't quite get it would become my new full-time job. There were a lot of meetings, phone calls, accusations, frustrations, but also kindness, accommodation, and cooperation. It depended on the day and the person we were talking to. These sentences also belong in the present tense. Throughout the years, there has been anaphylaxis, hives, vomiting, tears, ambulance rides, hospital visits, respiratory failure, and tachycardia, where he remained on breathing machines fighting for his life. He was 5. That is a story in and of itself. We'll get there one day, but not yet. Every day was and is different. Some days it's a breeze. Some days I wind up in tears. But every night is the same. I lay in bed and I stare at the ceiling. I pray and give gratitude that we made it through another day unscathed, or that the reaction we had that day wasn't the final one. But I always end it in prayer. The story goes on every day. It doesn't have an ending like stories should. I can't offer that to those listening. Trust me, I wish I could. But then again, that's the purpose of this project, to share the everyday, to educate the masses that allergies are more than just asking your kid to not eat peanut butter at the school lunch table or to not eat nuts on an airplane. Allergies are exclusion. They are anxiety. They are screams of frustration. They are isolation. They are EpiPens. They are tubes down the throat. They are fear of loss. They are loss. Loss of freedom, loss of friendship, loss of security, loss of life. The goal is to get people to understand our world, one that goes on and on in perpetual fear, but also hope. So instead of an ending, I'll offer that. Hope that we can figure this out, that we can come together to bridge the gap between frustration and tolerance. Will we get there? To be continued.